Hello, welcome to Making Photos. I'm Ian M. Butterfield. Do you want to create the perfect sunset? It sounds easy, doesn't it? But there are a few gotchas. I looked at this topic a while back on one of my live streams, so let's go and join the live stream and I'll explain how to create the perfect sunset photo. Let's talk about sunrise and sunset. This is our theme for the evening. And there's really two key areas to think about with sunrise and sunset. The things which make a huge difference between a mediocre sunset image and a great sunset image. And the two key areas that tend to get forgotten are foreground and the colour of the light. The colour of the light is all to do with white balance in our photography. Let's just take a step back and maybe very briefly talk about what white balance is all about. Now, I know most of you all know this, but for the sake of those who may not, I just want to go through it briefly. It's not a full in-depth explanation about white balance. It's just enough so that you understand where we're coming from on this. What does white balance do? Basically, white balance removes the colour cast due to the light. All light has colour, and that will affect what you are photographing. So, looking at myself at the moment, I'm wearing a grey shirt. Now, quite clearly, if you shone a red light on me, my shirt would appear to be red. If you shone a blue light on this grey shirt, it would appear to be blue. And if you wanted to illuminate me with a red light, but you wanted my shirt to appear grey, you'd need to subtract the red light from the final image. And that's what white balance does. It subtracts the colour of the light. You might say, yeah, but I'm not using red gels and blue gels. Well, every light has a colour to it. And the human eye is not very good at detecting it. In fact, actually what we've got is a very good white balance, because we can look at a scene and we can see the colour that's in front of us, almost irrespective of the light that's being shone on there. And to give you sort of a few examples, this you'll probably appreciate that tungsten lighting, the old-fashioned light bulbs, tungsten light bulbs, have a very much an orange glow to them. Candlelight is a very, very orange glow to it. Daylight has a bluish tint to it. Shadow and shade is even bluer on that colour cast. We tend to ignore it, but the camera doesn't, and it colours the images that we are creating because of it. So, what we do to get true colour on an image, again, to get my grey shirt to appear grey, we tell the camera what the colour of the light is. And we can say, I'm shooting under tungsten. This is the white balance setting. I'm shooting under flash. Or I'm using a thing called AWB, which is auto white balance. And what auto white balance does is it tells the camera, I don't know what colour the light is, but analyse the image and have a guess, and then try and subtract that. And the algorithms that they've put in are really good at doing this, except in certain circumstances. So if you have got a scene which has got a predominantly one colour, for example here in the studio, if I'm shooting a model on a pink background or a yellow background or something like that, a coloured background, the camera sees that big area of single colour and goes, whoa, the real world doesn't look like that. I better subtract that pink, I better subtract that yellow or whatever. And that gives a strange colouring to the skin if you're in auto white balance. I think I've pulled up before the slides on that. If you want to know more about that particular item, go and have a look on my YouTube channel, and I've got a tutorial all on white balance on there in the studio, and why you use it. It's a pin-up model called Cute of Sin, and I do a tutorial with her and show you the differences on there. But if you've got it set to auto white balance, the camera most of the time will analyze the scene and remove any strong color casts on there, and it's pretty darn good at doing it. That's what auto white balance is all about. The trouble is, if you want to record the color of the light, which is what sunsets and sunrises are all about, it's all about recording the color of the light. If you leave your camera on auto white balance, the camera will subtract that and give you a less than sunsetty effect. Here, for example, is an image created with auto white balance. It's not a brilliant composition, but it serves the purpose on here. That's with auto white balance, and the camera has analysed it and said, oh, there's a lot of orange in there, I'd better remove that, and it's taken it out. What it's supposed to look like was that, and that's when the white balance has been manually set with it. So if you're doing sunrise and sunsets, you need to get a grip of your white balance. So how do you set the white balance? Well, there's basically 4 different ways you could do it, 4 possible solutions to it. Firstly is to fix the white balance to something in camera. And the one I use is shade or cloudy white balance. I've used that, and it just tells the camera, right, don't analyze it, just if there is a color cast here, it's because I want it here, and it tries not to take too much of it out with the white balance. So you fix it at something like that. So I use shade or cloudy white balance. But basically any manual white balance will help with it on there. If you're using a compact camera, the chances are it's got a sunset mode in there, in the creative modes. And what the sunset mode does is it tells the camera, don't remove all the orange from it, leave it in there. Or you can manually set your white balance. And I've used 8000 Kelvin as a manual white balance to really push the orange effect on an image on there, so you can do that. Alternatively, if you are shooting RAW, then you can set this in Lightroom afterwards as a free change, and it is completely free if you are doing it on a RAW file. If you're doing it on a JPEG file, it does degrade your image slightly if you're doing it in post-production rather than doing it in camera. So I always recommend, I always recommend shooting in RAW actually, but if you're not shooting in RAW, try and get your white balance right in camera, because that will give you the best possible results. So those are your 4 solutions to getting the right white balance to create your image. So I'll be honest, a lot of the time I will set shade or cloudy in camera, but then I will set it in Lightroom to whatever I want in post-production, because it's a free change. So that's how I get the colours right for a sunset. Next thing I was thinking about with sunsets is to talk about really the foreground. What makes sunsets beautiful? Well, what makes a sunset beautiful is this huge swathe of bright colours that's in front of us, covering the whole horizon or the whole vista that's in front of us. It's the size of it, it's the scope of it all. And when we condense that down to a little image this size, it just doesn't do it justice. It loses that impact that we have from the scene in front of us, and we look at it on our camera or we look at it on our screen and go, you know what, that doesn't look half as good as what we're seeing in front of us. Well, you can help the final image by having something else of interest in there. Instead, you see, what happens is they just look bland because you've lost the scale of it. But if you put some foreground in there or a point of interest in there, the colours then act as something that draws focus to that something else. And the problem is, part of the problem is we're looking at these scenes and we're going, wow, wonderful sunset. And the rules of composition just get thrown out of the window because we're blown away by the sunset that's in front of us. So the easiest thing is get something between the camera and the sunset to give that point of focus. So here we are on the island of Bequia in the Caribbean. They have some of the most wonderful sunsets in the world there, and you can see here, imagine that shot without the boats in it. It'd be just a little bland, it's just orange. But the fact that I've got the boats towards the horizon, I've got the little tender boat going off towards them, it gives that interest to it. It makes the image work by putting that foreground interest in there. Another type of foreground interest that works really well is the idea of silhouettes with your sunsets. Now, when you're doing that, the key thing you have to remember is to concentrate on getting the exposure right for the sky. Because what's going to happen, you will have probably a large area of black within your image. That's your silhouette. And what does the camera do? It sees this large area of dark and it goes, whoa, that's underexposed. I will try and bring that up so you can see that detail. And it brings it up and it overexposes the background. So you get a washed out sunset on there, and you get detail in the foreground which you weren't necessarily looking for, because what you actually wanted was a silhouette. So this is where you're going to need exposure compensation to dial things back. Negative exposure compensation, pull it down, and if you're not sure whether you've got it right, look at your histogram. I did a session all about histograms and all about exposure compensation and how those work together. So go and have a look at those if you haven't worked, if you're still not clear on that. So the aim is make sure your sky remains deep colours on there. Doesn't blow out. Yes, the sun might blow out on it, but the sky itself shouldn't. So here we go, a couple of examples on it. This is the midnight sun in Iceland. This was in Tenerife, going up onto Mount Teide there. Videographer filming the sunset, so I've got him in silhouette there. Another similar silhouette to that, or not created there, created in Crete, is that you've seen it online, I'm sure, my avatar that I've used for years and years, just me in silhouette. And it's all the same thing. I've exposed for the sky on there to make sure that the image is right. Again, similar idea here. I've dialed back the exposure to make sure I've got that true silhouette of the figures watching the sunset. Or in this case, photographing it. What about photographing people at sunset? Well, the example I'm going to give is all to do with I've done it with a model, but this will apply with non-models as well, any people you want to shoot at sunset. It's a great time because the sunset acts as a great background, but if you use an external flash to illuminate your subject, you can do this with on-camera flash, but I find it much easier to do it with off-camera flash where everything's in manual mode, to be honest. And the aim is to balance the fading daylight with the light from the flash. Get it right and you will have an image looking like this. Now, how do I achieve that? Right, three steps. First of all, I create the image by taking a shot of the background, basically of the sunset itself in manual mode, and my aim is to keep my shutter speed below 125th of a second. And I make a note of what f-stop I'm shooting at with that. So I've got my background correctly exposed, the sunset correctly exposed at a shutter speed no faster than 125th of a second. I note the f-stop the camera is set at. I then set up my flash gun with a remote trigger, probably with some form of softbox modifier or umbrella modifier if you haven't got a softbox, and I then meter that so that the output from the flash, remember when you measure a flash output, it's measured as an F number. I measured that so that, for example, suppose my when I did the shot of the sunset the shutter speed was 125th of a second. Let's assume that the aperture was f5.6. So I set my flash gun up, I give it a mid power output, meter the light at the model pointing towards the flash gun, and it reads f8, so I know I've got to turn it down by 1 stop's worth of light, meter it again, f5.6. I can take the shot now, knowing the flash will illuminate my subject, my model, correctly, and the background already was being illuminated correctly by the daylight, so they both are correctly illuminated. I might put in an additional flash, a lower power, or use a reflector just to act as a fill light on there. And if you want to know what it all looks like, that shot I showed you, there is the behind the scenes view of it. I hope you found that advice helpful and useful. If you've got any sunset images that you would like to share with my audience here, then please upload them to my Facebook group. The link is down below, and I'll give you some feedback on them as well. And once you've created the perfect sunset, what you need to do is photograph the perfect moon photo. And you want to know how to do that, there's a video here with all the instructions you'll need, and a playlist here of other videos which will help take your photography to the next level. So thanks for watching, and until next time, keep making great photos. Bye for now.